Welcome everyone to the SharePoint Dev Ecosystem PMP community call for April. I mean, time just moves so fast. Besa just spoke about the Teams. There's some good reasons why we're not using Teams yet. I'll just skip that. So Skype for Business works just fine. And the agenda for today is, so we have some news, we have a monthly summary, some other details. We have a cool demo from Bert Jansen from Microsoft about the transformation of classic publishing pages to modern publishing pages. That's a pretty cool tool, actually, so I've been using that a little bit myself. And then Andrew Connell from Voitanos will do a demo on using Microsoft Graph SharePoint Framework in Teams. That's also pretty cool. And of course, I forgot to say who I am. So my name is Mikael Svenson. I'm a CTO at Puzzlepart, and I'm also a member of the PMP team. I always forget that. If you're interested in some of the special interest group calls, we have a bi-weekly SharePoint Framework call and also a SharePoint General Development calls with the links here on the slide. So if you're interested, go to those links and add those to your calendar. And then, of course, you have this call as well, which you already have in your calendar. If you're interested in the documentation, we have AKMS SPDev docs, a lot of good videos on SPDev videos, and then if you need to log some issues regarding SharePoint development, that'd be SharePoint Framework, CSOM, or anything else regarding the APIs. Here's some good stats from March. We're now up to 220,000 minutes of watch time in YouTube, which is pretty awesome. That's a lot of people. So divide on almost 38,000 different persons. There's a lot of people going into GitHub, looking at the documentation, looking at issues, and also committing code. So we have a slide on that a little bit later. And there is a bunch of tenants using PMP. It's just growing and growing and growing. It's I can't really believe it from where it started until where we're at today on PMP. And if you look at the SharePoint Framework, you see it's a pretty hefty growth. So this growth goes from, so they go from October 2017, so that's October last year, until now, and you see it just grows and grows and grows. So it's been pretty linear, I guess, for the last couple of months, but I guess this will never stop. Hopefully it won't. And I think Besa had something you want to say about the updated training.
Yeah, I wanted to actually say a few things about that one. So just recently, last week, we have now included 3 more additional modules on this one. If you actually use the AKMS SPFX training link in here, unfortunately, that page does not yet have those 3 additional modules available, but you can find them on YouTube, and I'm working on getting those included in the single page, so you can easily access that. So there's now 3 new modules where AC is presenting this, so it's not in Finglish, it is in proper English, so to say, and that's for smiles at least. So using React and Office UI Fabric React components, deploying SharePoint Framework components to production, and then the last one is really interesting as well, building Microsoft Teams customization using SharePoint Framework. So 3 new modules, and all of these modules have video, presentation, demo material, hands-on lab material. So you can actually execute all of these by yourself if you're interested in doing that, or you can redeliver by using this material. So if you're a Microsoft certified trainer, if you are or somebody who leads a team in your company, you can easily use this material to deliver this similar set of trainings or subset of trainings, or let's say 3 module trainings to your team or your customers and whatever. So everything is for you to use without any permission requests needed. We're highly interested in getting your feedback, how we can improve this material, but you can use this any way you want in your conference presentation, training materials, whatever is necessary. And thank you, AC, for sharing the direct links as well. I will update the AKMS SPFX training links, point to a page in the official docs where we will list the whole training package and the guidance on how you can use that. But I think that's about that one. We will see a social media announcements on this one probably tomorrow. So as long as I get those out. But Mikael?
Yes, and then we have the awesome new service, the provisioning service.
Yeah, I wanted to actually talk on this one as well. So this is something which went live since the last monthly summary call or monthly dev call. So HTTP or HTTPS provisioning.sharepointpmp.com, and you can provision SharePoint lookbook sites to any SharePoint tenant in the world. So if you are a consultant, or you're doing pre-sales, or you need to convince your manager that modern SharePoint is insanely cool, it's the easiest way to do that is go to that URL, be a tenant administrator of a sample tenant where you want to get the content provision, and then install stuff to your tenant. And it is seriously just by clicking a one or two buttons in a mouse, giving the permissions for the service as well, and then that provisions to needed site collections and content. And then you have exactly the similar kind of content available as what we used in Microsoft demos in Ignite 2018. So we wanted to make this as easy as possible for everybody. Have you, Mikael, tested this?
Yes, we're actually using it right now. So I have a couple of the test tenants where you want to show clients some of the power with some of the out-of-the-box web parts and also some of the free web parts. Yeah. And then the spinning up these demo sites is pretty powerful, just showing them what's available out of the box before you start adding even more.
Absolutely.
I mean, yeah. And as you saw on the growth of SharePoint Framework, people are doing custom development as well. There's a lot of SharePoint Framework parts being deployed.
Oh yes, absolutely. And like you said, these are great tools for demonstrating what's available out of the box. And we are actually adding here in the future more and more also solutions, so reusable solutions. So there is already Office 365 custom learning solution where a few of our MVPs have been involved together with our fast track, building a reusable solution. One thing what I would remind around this one, please, many of the templates are pretty simple. They're just a site collection and content, but those which actually have customizations, they might have pre-requirements. So like your application catalog has to exist because there's no API for automate that in our side. So please double check the pre-requirements before you use the service or when you apply the template. But the basic templates, they do work.
Yeah, and make sure your tenant is in English, at least for now. And
that's a good point. Absolutely good point. Thank you.
And bugs are being fixed. And bugs are being fixed as soon as we see them.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I think that's it. Thank you.
Yeah. And then if you want some more fun calls instead of this, the Dev Weekly or the special interview groups, you have Besa and Waldeck has every week the SharePoint Dev Weekly, where they talk about anything and everything, and they typically make fun of some of my blog posts or some of my titles for things, but that's fine. If you have some questions for them or you did something cool or you want them to cover something, you can go on Twitter and use the SBDev Weekly hashtag, and they will pick it up and sort through, and then you might be a part of their dev show. Maybe you'll even be a guest. And then I want to talk a little bit about the user voice. So user voice actually matters. So if you look at the list from here, so number 3, which is single-page applications for SharePoint Framework and the libraries support for SharePoint Framework, they have now been released since last month. That means just continue uploading. If you have a good issue you want engineering to look at, make sure you get added to user voice, use Twitter, use whatever means necessary to get those votes up, and there's a higher chance for it to actually be released and prioritized over all the other tasks which has to be done. So that's something you should take care of. All right. And then, of course, there's a new monthly release of PMP Core, and PMP PowerShell. A lot of new stuff in there as well. If we look at last month's contributors, there's a lot of names on this. Just keeps growing. There's a lot of familiar names here, but new people are actually being added and start doing pull requests on Core, on SharePoint Framework, web parts, samples, PowerShell, just about any part of PMP, and there's actually a lot of documentation fixes as well. So keep on doing that. If you find something you think is wrong or you want to contribute, log an issue, do a discussion, and then possibly do a pull request and get your name on this slide. It's as easy as pie. And then thank you to all the companies who actually allow their developers to contribute and use either project time or company time to do these pull requests on the different parts. I know I'm one using at least part of my time, typically on customer projects doing the stuff I do on PnP. So it's a lot easier when someone supports it. And this is nothing new in open source. I mean, you look at Linux World or Red Hat, there's a lot of people actually being paid or using their work time to contribute. So just get your employer to fund you to do the PRs you need when you want to fix something. And we'll put your name on this slide as well. And then there's a lot of people inside of Microsoft as well who contribute. We have Bert, who will do the demo, of course, and then some from engineering and from different parts. So, and as I say, Besa added himself at the bottom. Is that alphabetically, or is it by?
It's a by preference. So I don't care that much by myself contributing. So that's fine.
Yeah. Yes. So I think we'll start off with the first demo by Bert. So you ready, Bert?
Yep. Thank you, Mikael. So while I'm sharing the screen, the demo is around a new capability that we released with the April release of PnP PowerShell, and that's around doing page transformation for publishing pages. So for folks who've been in these meetings before, you might have heard about the page transformation technology that we have, where we essentially allow you to take a wiki or web page and generate a modern client-side page from that particular page. There was a high demand for having this for publishing pages as well. And well, here it is, meaning it is in preview. It is available in the April release. So if you download the PnP PowerShell April release, you can use it. Or if you pull down the .NET packages, you can use it as well directly in .NET if you kind of want to extend around it, etc. Now, I only have one slide, and that's actually this one. One address to remember, and that's ak.ms/sppnp-page transformation. So in this, this link brings you to docs.microsoft.com with all documentation around page transformation. The docs on the publishing support are maybe a little bit light, but we're working on a webcast series, having I think 8 videos showing like how to do page transformation, different aspects, different options, etc. So rest assured, more documentation is coming. Now let's close the slides and do a demo. What I have here is a basic classic publishing portal and a couple of pages. So let's first go to this D95 specs page. I'm going to show you guys 2 pages to be transformed. One using an out-of-the-box layout, like a very basic, simple one, and then a slightly more complex one, just to show you the options. And before someone makes a comment, I'm not a designer, I'm not good at making fancy pages, so this is just a demo page. It maybe doesn't look really nice, but I hope you can get the idea behind. This is a classic publishing page with some properties, so page image, some rich text content, a byline, article date, what else do we have? Some formatted text, a table, and then a roll-up image. Now, how does this look like a modern page when we convert it? So for that, we need a PnP PowerShell. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And let's sign in to our PowerShell session. So I'm going to sign in to my page transformation demo portal. I use the SPL management shell option because that's an option to authenticate that kind of works in all situations. If you have two-factor authentication, for example, this one works nicely. Password correctly, like this. All right, done. Now let's convert this first page. And to convert a classic page into a modern page, there's one commandlet to remember. That's convert to -pnp client-side page. This same commandlet works for both wiki and web pages, but also for publishing pages. When you do a publishing page transformation, you have to specify this -publishing page parameter, and you have to specify a target web URL. Why? Because publishing page transformation always goes to a new site collection. So we don't support you having like modern pages mixed together with classic publishing pages in the same site collection. That doesn't work. That's not supported, so we can't do that. However, when you specify target web URL, pointing to, in this case, a communication site, your modern version of the publishing page will end up over there. So this all looks good. So let's give it a try. Actually, just let me open up my target one real quick. So this is my target site collection where the page will be created. Go into pages. It should be empty, and yes, it is. So, all right, let's go. Keeping fingers crossed. While this one is running, it will create the page in another site collection, which also implies kind of the question might pop up like, what about assets? Meaning my page has images like you saw in my demo. What do you do with those images? Now, these images are copied over to the target page. So if you go to the target page, you already see this page being created over here. And before we look at the page, let's go to site contents, go to site assets. So you see that we are creating a site pages folder, and that in here we have images. So the transformation tag actually does copy the images that are needed to make the page work. Let's go back to site pages, pages over here. And let's have a look at our page. So the page transformation is done. Opening up the page. And voila, this is our modern publishing page. So what you see is that we've taken over the header. The content is there. Looks pretty nice, but still basic page. Let's kind of make it slightly more complex. Let's go back to our.
So as a quick question, so if you edit this page, will it keep all the formatting, or how is that? How does that work?
So if you edit the page, it's a modern page, meaning you can then play around, change the header if you want. I want a plain header or the image header. It's like a classic. It's a classic modern page. That sounds weird, but it's a modern page that you can just start editing and then publish once you're ready. So. If that answers the question, Mikael?
Yes.
All right.
Awesome.
Now, of course, no one makes publishing pages using a default page layout without a custom master page. So this was a very simple demo. Now, what if we have a slightly more complex page? So if I go back to my pages library, and let's open up the 88, another drone. Now, this page still doesn't look pretty, but it is a publishing page. It has a bit more content in it. So let's put this in edit mode. First of all, what you see here is that this page has it's a custom page layout. The custom page layout has a fixed web part. So folks tend to kind of put a web part inside a page layout, and then it appears on all the pages based upon that page layout. So that's what we have here. And furthermore, it has a web part zone. So if I actually pull up the page layout file, scrolling down a little bit, you see here that we have a web part zone in the page layout, and we have a fixed content editor web part in there, which contains some HTML, pointing to some images, etc. So what you see on the page over here, if you go back, is actually this is the content editor HTML, which is embedded in the page layout. The web part zone has one web part on it, and then we have the usual page content, so the rich text page content, the page image, and some properties. And furthermore, we have, if I go to the page properties here, there is also some additional metadata. So we have a contact, and we have some, if I scroll down, I think we have some summary links. So all of this is defined as part of the classic publishing page. Now, how do you move this over to a model page? You can imagine that it's quite hard to automatically figure out where to put what, etc. So that's why we have introduced the concept of a page layout mapping, which is an example over here. Now, why was there no page layout mapping in the previous page? Because there wasn't out-of-the-box page. So we have a built-in page layout mappings for any out-of-the-box page layout. But if you have a custom page layout, we try to do like a best effort. We generate the page layout on the fly and use that. But that gives you like a single column, everything in there, boom, dumped into one big column. Now, if you want to have it a bit more fancy, you can generate a page layout yourself. So actually, there is like this export-pnp client-side page mapping. You just specify built-in page layout, custom page layout mapping, hit enter, and it will analyze all the page layouts in your publishing portal and generate an XML file like this kind of. Now, I did some cleanup in this one because I want to show you some key things here. First of all, the header. You can control how the header is built. So here we say like publishing rollup image goes to the header image server relative URL. The article byline field of the publishing page goes to the topic header of the modern header, etc. So you can control that. You can control metadata. So in this case, the taxonomy field called drone category, which I will copy to drone types. What else? We have content on the page.
And you have some custom functions there as well, I see, with to author and to image URL.
Yes, so the functions kind of rewrite the text a little bit. Like in this case, to image URL, when you get a publishing page image field, is an image tag. But we need only the image URL, so we kind of strip away the other stuff using this custom function. And this is all extendable. You can write your own functions, etc. But that goes way too far for this quick demo. But you can kind of control the visual content. What will be a web part? So remember, the publishing page is metadata and visual content. Now, the classic page these are all fields. In a modern page, you have to kind of think about what will be on the page and what will be metadata. So this will be the content on the page. So an image, rich text content, and summary links. We have a web part zone. So we tell where the zone lives, row 3, column 1, and then we have this fixed web part, which is in there as well. So this all together drives the page transformation for this more advanced page. So let's see how that works. So let's move this away. I'm going to copy a command line real quick. Let's do that here. Just a sec. All right, copy, paste. So the same convert to PNP client-side command. Different now is that we have this page layout mapping where we point to our custom mapping that we created. For the rest, it's kind of the same. So when you hit enter right now, we'll do the conversion of this D88 page into our target site collection. So I'm going to cancel this one here. Let's close this one. Let's go over here. You see the page already being created. It might not yet be fully finished. No, it's still busy, but typically it was already good to have a look at. So let's wait a second more. Okay, let's see. Let's open up the page, and here we have our D88 modern version of the page. Again, you see the same pretty cool header. So the page rollup image becomes the header image, byline, etc. is taken over as being the tag here. We have our rich content. That all looks good. We have our quick links. So let's put this in edit mode so you can see it slightly better. Remember that we had those summary links. Those summary links are converted to quick links. Now, by default, we take this list view, but if you put this, for example, in a film strip view, it already looks better, right? So nice image links. These images are also kind of converted to the other side, to the new site collection. Here we have the embedded content in the page layout. It's now actual content on the page. And finally, we have our list view web part.
So is there some documentation who tells you what's supported or features in the old publishing and what they will be translated to in the modern pages?
Yes, there is, if you go to this ak.ms link, it's PNP page transformation, and there is this, let me see, page transformation, classic web part to model mapping. This is the one which explains which classic web parts that we have, what will be the model equivalent, some comments, and whether cross-site is supported. So not everything works in a cross-site mode, and sometimes there are some restrictions. So that's all documented here. And there's also this PowerShell page showing how to use this from PowerShell, like I'm doing right now, from .NET, if you want, etc. So there's a lot of documentation there, and there will be like a video series on this as well in the upcoming days.
Yeah. And if someone is missing out of the box old web part, which we should translate into new web part, feel free to log an issue on that over on the PNP side, and we look into it. Or if you want to contribute yourself, you can.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Would love. Actually, I would like to call out. Please give this a try. This is the first time that we have publishing support. It's in preview. We have done testing, of course, but we don't have like a real life portals. So if you have real life portals, just give it a try. Let us know how it works. Create your mapping files and play around and see and give us feedback. This is open source, so the feedback there is this. If you go to the GitHub SharePoint organization, we have this our modelization repository.
So where should people log issues for the page transformation? Should they log in the PowerShell repo or in the transformation repo, or that's in general?
Preferably in the transformation repository. So this SPDEF modelization contains all the tools and guidance and around modelization, including page transformation. So please create it in the issue list over here so that we can track it. If it's in PowerShell, meaning we'll pick it up as well, but I think this is the best place to put the issue.
Awesome work.
So looking at the questions, I see Connell's asking what about custom web parts. Meaning, yes, you can use a custom web part mapping file as well. There's no time to demo it today, but you can specify your own web part mapping file where you can kind of say like, I have this old web part which goes to my custom built SharePoint Framework web part. So it's fully extendable and you can tweak it and tailor it to fit your needs. But I hope this gave you like a kind of a small teaser, and I hope you guys want to try it out and provide feedback.
And maybe we should add a blocker, so if someone uses old script web part, they cannot map it to the modern script at the web part. That's not allowed.
Well, yeah, this.
Or we could log a warning at least, right? That'd be fun. Yeah.
I always saw that, but yeah. All right. Thanks, Mikael. I think back to you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much. That was awesome stuff. I think this will actually be useful. So I've used it a little bit myself for wiki pages, and I have a client right now where we actually do modern pages side by side with publishing pages. I know it's not supported, but we're actually doing it, and this will actually help moving those last pages over to the site pages library, and then we can kill off the pages library or maybe create a new site.
Yep.
Yeah. And then next up will be a demo by Andrew Connell. So are you ready, Andrew?
I am ready. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So are you able to take over the screen?
It should be starting to share right now. Let me know when you can see a slide.
I can see your slide. Take it away.
Cool. All right, thanks. So I've got very few slides for what I'm doing today. Just a real quick, my name is Andrew Connell. You got my contact information there. SharePoint or an Office Apps and Services MVP, which is funny. That kind of means that they classify me as an IT pro. Anybody that knows me knows that is way off base, and I'm more of a developer. And then some other information that you can see there about me. Before we get started, though, I do want to have one special call out. I know we all have this joke here about how you want to get in touch with Besa or you want to get something done. The joke is to send him an email that just starting with Dear Besa. I can tell you that from this past weekend, it actually works because I went to a IndyCar race over the weekend and I printed out something that said Dear Besa, and I got one of the drivers to hold it up. This is Takuma Sato. Guess who got position 1 for the pole position in qualifying and won the race? So Takuma Sato is a fan of Besa. All right, let's back off the slides and let's actually see some real stuff here. So what I want to cover is what I want to cover today is talking a little bit about working with the SharePoint framework and with Microsoft Teams. And so you would use the SharePoint framework to customize or to extend Teams by creating custom tabs. Now I've already got something that is already created here, and I'm going to show it to you that's already working. We're not going to go through the process of building it up and deploying it. But I want to call out a couple things about this. First, there's a little bit of an issue with how things look right now. If you might have seen some of the docs, or if you have tried different things you've seen in the UI, I want to make sure that you're aware of the fact that some things are not fully deployed everywhere. So I want to show you the other option, the other way of dealing with it. Then I also want to show you one of the benefits to working with the SharePoint framework and using the SharePoint framework as your extensibility option when it comes to working with Microsoft Teams. The big benefit that I would see there, or one of the big benefits here, is that when you're building custom tabs with just the Microsoft Teams SDK and the way that the Teams team has really been pushing extensibility for a while, if you want to leverage things in, say, the Microsoft Graph or in a Azure AD secured service, it can always be a little bit of trouble to get this working. Anyway, one of the nice things about working with the SharePoint framework, then, as I was talking about earlier, is that instead of having to go do a bunch of extra work to try and connect to Microsoft Graph or to Azure AD secured services, when you use the SharePoint framework, when you're extending Microsoft Teams, you get to leverage all of the stuff that the SharePoint framework has right inside of it out of the box. And that includes some of the support we have for the Microsoft Graph. So in this project we have here, what I've done is I've got two special things in here. One of them is going to show the different context between the working inside SharePoint and working inside Teams. But then I'm also going to show you how we can leverage the Microsoft Graph in both solutions. Now, all I did was I just created a brand new project using the 1.8 version of the SharePoint framework. So you can see all these 1.8 references. And then inside the manifest file for my project, all I did was come in and add in this extra bit that you see that I have highlighted here, which says for the supported hosts, this can run both inside SharePoint as a SharePoint web part. So that was already there. And then the part that I have highlighted is I added in Teams tab. So what this is telling Microsoft, or telling Office 365, is that this customization can be loaded as a custom tab inside of a Microsoft Teams team. So I added this little reference in here, and then inside my code, I went in and I just went ahead and coded up my web part. Now, the only thing that's kind of interesting about this guy is that if I come up here, let's go to the top here, you can see right here where I've added in a reference to the Microsoft Teams JavaScript SDK. Now, a little bit farther down, inside my web part itself, I have a private member that I defined called Teams Context, as well as I've overloaded the onInit method. And all I'm doing in the onInit method is I'm checking to see, is the Microsoft Teams object present on the context? And if it is, what that is saying is that we are in Microsoft Teams. And so I then try to go get the context from Microsoft Teams and assign it to that private member that you see above, and then resolve the promise. Otherwise, I'm going to be inside SharePoint, and so I just go ahead and resolve the promise, which leaves this private member that I've defined as undefined. So let's scroll down a little bit farther and let's look inside this render method. What are we doing? So all I'm doing inside a render is I've created two different variables here. I've got a title property and a current location property, and all they're doing is checking to see, am I currently in a Teams context? And if I am, then let's say that we're in a Teams context, and let's say what the name of the team is that I'm in. Let's go ahead and write that out to this string. Otherwise, we'll say we're in SharePoint and the name of the SharePoint site collection that we're in. So then what I do is inside my render method, to show us which one we're in, I'm going to say, here's the title. So it's either going to say, welcome to Teams or welcome to SharePoint. And then it's going to say, welcome to, or currently in the context of the following current location. So I'm either in the context of a SharePoint site collection with the name of the site collection, or in the context of a Microsoft team. Now, one of the other things that I've done that's kind of interesting here is you see that I'm using the Microsoft Graph support that we have inside the SharePoint framework. So I haven't had to do anything special to get this working, just the standard old Microsoft Graph support that we've done, which just involves two things. One is leveraging the Microsoft Graph inside of my component. And then the other thing is leveraging the granting a permission or a scope to my tenant. We'll see that in just a minute. But you can see here that I'm getting a reference to the client, to the Microsoft Graph. I'm then going to the endpoint to see my information or my profile information. And when I get that back, I'm going to have a user object that comes back, and I'm just going to write out some information about me. So you can see what my display name is and my mail is. And of course, you could do all kinds of stuff with the Microsoft Graph, but in this case, I just wanted to show that, hey, look how easy it is. It's just like working with the SharePoint framework. Now, what do we end up doing? We then build this up, we package it, we bundle it, and we package it, and I've got my SPFX Teams SP.pkg file that's been generated. So I went over here to my apps for SharePoint, over to my site, my app catalog for my tenant, and I uploaded this solution right here, and everything's good to go. Now, when I did this, I specified that this was Tenant Deploy. Now, this is just an easy way to do it. Maybe this is what you want in your environment. Maybe you don't. It's up to you. But I just went with the easy approach. So when I created the project, it said, do you want to, enable feature deployment? And what I did is I said, skip feature deployment is set to true, which basically is saying, yes, you can deploy this web part to automatically have it installed to all site collections throughout your tenant. So that's going to make it easy. It's going to let any Microsoft team inside of my tenant have access to use this. And the reason why is because every Microsoft team, the backing of it is a SharePoint site collection. And so if this is already installed into all the site collections, including the ones that are the backing to a Microsoft team, then that means when I want to install this, it's still going to run on that team. Now we'll see, I'll show a little bit more of the details of how this works when we actually get to the Teams part in just a minute. Now, once I uploaded that, this is the part where I want to give you a little bit of a caveat and give you a little bit of a heads up on how things are going to work. If I select this item and I go over here to the Files ribbon, or the Files tab in the ribbon, you'll see this button here that says Sync to Teams. Now, this kind of works today, kind of doesn't work. What this will do is if I had set inside of the manifest for my web part, if I had set that this was available as a Teams tag, then this button is enabled. Otherwise, it was going to be disabled. If I click this, what it would do is it would use the information from my from my SharePoint project, and it would dynamically generate the manifest file needed for a Microsoft Teams or Microsoft Teams app package. To be able to define this custom application. And then it would generate the zip file that contained the two images, which you see by default inside of a SharePoint framework project now when you use 1.8. So you get these two pictures. It'll dynamically generate the manifest. It'll create a zip file containing the two images and the manifest file it generated, and it will automatically deploy that to your Microsoft Teams tenant catalog or the store. Now, that's the way it's going to work eventually. Today, I've been working with Microsoft off and on the last week or so, and we've identified that it doesn't always work like that right now. So my 2 cents is don't use this Sync to Teams feature right now because it's not terribly reliable. It will be. Even if you click it, you'll get this little message over here that will say successfully synchronize the Teams, and that's great, but then you go to Teams and it's not there. So I'll show you another way to do it in just a minute. But before we do that, let's take a look and see this web part actually running. So I have a SharePoint site collection running inside of this tenant. And I've already added this web part to a page so we can see this web part running. So if I go over here to my pages, I've got a page called testbed. So I'm going to jump to my testbed. Go take a little nap. Nope, not yet. Rendered too fast, so I can't do that just yet. And if I scroll down, we can see that we're in SharePoint. The current context is inside of a site collection named vdemos01. This is just some text from my web part. And then check out that this is the details from the Microsoft Graph. So I can see that I'm logged in using a demo tenant that I have called the the username is MOD Administrator, and then that's the actual account I'm logged in as. Okay, that's all great, fine and good. That's SharePoint. But what about Microsoft Teams? So I'm going to come over here to Teams, go teams.microsoft.com, and it's going to nag me, say, don't you want to use the client? And I'm going to say, no, I want to use the browser. Oh, of course, it doesn't ask me that this time. Now it's going to go straight to the browser. Fantastic. Okay, sweet. So that's good. And, I've already got it added. So let's go ahead and let's create a new team now. So this is going to be not my first team. I'm going to create a brand new team called my second team. It's not really true. I've created a lot. And check it out. You've got somebody that looks a lot like, well, I'm almost it. All right, we're going to skip. All right, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here and I'm going to want to go add in my web part. Now, here's the part that that gets a little screwy here. Now, I've already deployed this, so I'm going to see the experience that I would expect, which is I would come over here to say I want to add a tab. So I clicked on that plus, and if I scroll somewhere in here, I should see my custom tab that I've defined. Now, here's the part that's interesting. In the future, when that sync to tabs button is actually operational, this is what you would see. We'd be all in good shape. But today, it is, like I said, it's a little temperamental. And so what I did, and what I would recommend you do, at least until you see us update the docs for this, is that inside of my SharePoint, inside of my project here, my SharePoint Framework project, I've created a app manifest for the Microsoft Teams team, or the Microsoft Teams app manifest. I've created this myself. And if you go look at the documentation on the SharePoint Framework site, there's a sample that you can pull down, and the link that I'll post in just a minute to the training module that Besa mentioned earlier and that Mccaleb mentioned earlier. There's a lab that actually walks you through and gives you a reference to this file. But effectively, all you have to do is create this file, copy paste the one that you got in that was provided to you. There are a lot of little placeholders of things that you can go replace, like the name of the project and the description, as well as the icons. The important part here is that make sure that the pictures, the icons here, map the pictures that are inside of the Teams folder. So you see here this GUID that you see. That GUID is actually the GUID from, where's my source? From the web part itself. So notice here, there's the ID that ends in 8A3D. So if you grab this GUID, what I did is I went over to my manifest and I simply just made sure that that was the ID right here. As you see, that's the link to those two images. And let me go word wrap here. You will find another place where there'll be a component ID and it's referencing a GUID as well. So if you look at the lab that we have in there, it actually has some placeholders of things you can do a find and replace on these different strings, and it'll replace these three different options. Now, once you do that, you're going to take these three files. You're then going to zip them up, right? Don't zip up the folder. Just select these three files, and you would like right-click inside of Windows Explorer and Finder if you're on a Mac to zip them up into a file called whatever you want .zip. All right. If I come back over here to the browser, I wouldn't see my tab showing up the very first time. So what I could do is come over here to My Apps, and if I scroll down to the bottom here, you'll see Upload a Custom App, where you could then choose, do I want to upload it just for me, or do I want it just for my teams, or for my entire tenant? I could select this, and then pick the zip file that we just generated. Now, I've already done that, so I don't have to worry about this. But once you do that, you'll then see all your own little apps show up like I have here that are showing up and available for use. So that then the next time you go into one of your teams, like my second team, and I click on the little plus, and if I scroll down, I should find this tab here. So remember, that manual process is called side loading, and there's some other stuff that you may end up having to do with your tenant if you haven't set it up. Again, if you refer to the documentation that we have, it walks you through everything you need to do. The documentation is up on the SharePoint documentation site, specifically SharePoint Framework docs. And I'll grab links to those at the very end here if somebody else hasn't done that already by the time we switch back to the presentation. But so you have what?
Yeah, so this means, Andrew, so if we follow you on Twitter, you'll probably say Yahoo or something when the automatic sync is in place, so we don't have to do this manual process, right?
If you follow myself or Besa, you will probably hear us say not that or something like, finally. So what One of the two. We both thought it was working last week, and we started playing with it, and it's like, it looks like it's working, but it's not working. So there's just some weird kind of stuff going on that Microsoft's engineering is trying to track down and figure out what's going on. So it's think of that feature as in dev preview. That's me saying that. It's not Microsoft, but think of it as being in dev preview right now. So I don't think it's reliable. I wouldn't rely on it for now. But yeah, it's coming soon. So you either one of two ways. Either this process that I just showed you is called side loading. Eventually you won't have to do that, and eventually you will be able to just use the sync to teams, and ta-da, it'll work. The other nice thing though is that if you want to override the values of the manifest.json that Microsoft is generating dynamically, you can still use that same process I showed you of creating the manifest file. And when you click sync to teams, SharePoint Online, when you click sync to teams, it will see that you have a manifest file and say, oh, I'm going to use the one that you created, not dynamically create one so you have more control over it. So, all right, we're in good shape. So how we go ahead and add a tab? So I'm going to go hit plus. Let's scroll down. I'll pick this guy. Pops up, says you want to add it to a team. Yes, I do. I'm in the team, so it's not going to prompt me for that. I'm going to say install. The experience is going to be a little bit different than when you do a normal Microsoft. Why isn't it doing it? Install it, please. There we go. So the experience is a little bit different because I have some customization configuration options that I want to define on this specific web part, but it would normally be shown here. But because it's SharePoint, instead it's going to show it to me more the SharePoint style. So when the tab loads, you're going to see the property pane on the right-hand side open up with these two settings that I have defined here. And I'll go ahead and close this out and check it out. It's the same web part. Well, hold on. It's loading it. There we go. It's the same web part. So there we go. Now we're running in the context of Microsoft Teams. It knows the team that we're currently in, and I'm getting the same information from the Microsoft Graph because I'm already logged in using my same account. Everything just works. Now, one other cool thing that is neat about this is that notice here that my settings button is gone from this tab that you see here. And the reason why the settings button is gone is because in the code, if I look at the manifest file right here in the manifest file, I said can update configuration is equal to false. If I had, by setting this to false, you saw the configuration open up the first time when I added the web part or when I added the tab to the team. That's going to be the behavior you always see. You're always going to see that when you install a new tab or add a tab, you're always going to see the configuration tab pop up. And what that's doing is it's giving people who have permission to add tabs to a team, it's giving them the ability to customize it. But by setting this value to false, that's blocking users from being able to modify those configuration settings after the fact, after I've installed it in a team. So if I had set this to true, then when I come back over here to the browser, this would have said the settings link would have shown up here as a third option here. And then clicking on that would have opened up the property pane. But this is just giving us a way about, you know, the experience in Teams is a little bit different from the experience in SharePoint, where in SharePoint you can put the entire page in edit mode, and you have to have permissions to be able to do that. In Teams, there's no like put it in edit mode kind of context, and so instead you either have permissions to do something or not, and so that settings link is going to show up or not. This is how Microsoft chose to deal with it, and so that's really all I had to show. I mean, it's really straightforward and really easy. If you want to see how to do this, if you go to, and again, Besa said that he would be updating that SPF aka.ms/SPFX-training link. He will have that updated with, you'll see a bunch of social sharing stuff that goes out shortly. But for the meantime, if you just go to GitHub, here's the way I go to it. If you go to SharePoint or github.com/SharePoint, and then on the repositories list, if you do a search for training and scroll right today, if you scroll to the bottom, right here to this Teams Dev, if you go to this is what's going to be linked from that page that Besa has, and you'll find things like about a screencast, walking through stuff. There's an entire lab manual. If you go to the lab manual and you want to see that one thing that I referenced earlier, where it walks you through, and it says all the stuff. Here we go. So here's one little thing. You may notice this is the part that we just added as a call out to say, heads up that this sync to teams thing doesn't exactly work today. And then here's the part where you can go grab this manifest file that has all these different things, these replacement strings that you can go replace and what you're looking for in the component file. So like, for example, in this lab, that's where you'll find it. So it's made it as simple as we could possibly make it for you to go through and update this and to see this working. The demo that I just showed you is the exact same thing that's inside of this lab, except I added in this stuff for Microsoft Teams, or sorry, for the graph stuff that you see here with the user mail. That information is also inside of another training thing that we have, another training module that Besa is linked to, that he's already got listed up on that, what is it, the aka.ms SPFX training. And that's here inside this third-party APIs module where there's a lab on working with the Microsoft Graph. I just copied some of the code from that module to make it work.
Right. So Andrew, so you've been playing with this for, I know, for the last week or a couple of weeks. So are there any special things you really need to pay attention to when you start doing stuff, either to have it hosted both in Teams and SharePoint besides the manifest part, or are there any weird stuff you need to look at for the graph stuff to work?
No, I mean, the nice thing about it, it's a great question, Mikael. The nice thing about this is that it just feels like SharePoint Framework. I mean, I'm just still doing SharePoint Framework stuff. I haven't spent much time doing extension customizations to Microsoft Teams until the SharePoint Framework added this capability, or I guess the Teams team added this capability, or one of the two. And I was pleasantly surprised about how just natural it felt, or seamless it felt from working with the SharePoint Framework. There was really nothing special I had to do. I mean, the only part that I guess I have a flat spot on my forehead from banging it on the table trying to figure it out was the whole sync to Teams thing, where I saw the button which to me said, hey, this works now, and everything looked like it worked, except nothing was showing up inside of my Teams store. So right now it's just the side loading bit that you have to do. So I figured if that was frustrating me and confusing me, I worked with Besa last week and we got the docs updated to make it very clear to do the side loading approach and to ignore that sync to Teams button for now. So everything is pretty much there, and it just makes a whole lot of, it's really simple, really straightforward.
Yeah. Cool. Actually, Mikael, if one point which I really want to kind of reinforce, and AC said it really well, but one of the things what we really wanted to make easy for SPFX, and now through SPFX also for Teams, it is really the graph API approvals and hitting third-party APIs and everything else. Because otherwise, if we wouldn't have that admin UIs, and if we wouldn't be able to define the needed permissions in the SPPKG file, you would actually need to call somebody who owns the Azure installation, create the application there, grant the permissions, everything else. Now, all of that is taken care of. Also for Teams customizations, you don't need to worry about where your stuff is being hosted. Everything is automatic. You just write your stuff using SharePoint Framework, and we'll deal with the governance, we'll deal with operations, we'll deal with permissions and hosting and deployment. And that's what was the big thing for us when we were working together with Teams people, which they saw as a huge benefit in SPFX, because this way enterprise developers don't need to worry about where the stuff is getting hosted. It is just hosted automatically in SharePoint Online, even though it is visible in the context of Microsoft Teams.
So more or less we have made auto-hosted great again in Teams.
Kind of. Mikael, calling auto-hosted add-ins in these meetings is always terrifying because not that many people remember that anymore, but hey.
Well, they can Google it.
Oh, by the way, and AC, thank you for the Dear Besa images. Those were awesome. I'll flip back on the slides so Mikael can close up and we can have a discussion still in IM window. Because I will start the presentation. Here we go. So we'll move back on the slides.
Yes. All right. So that were our two demos. So the next meeting will be the SharePoint Framework meeting, April 11th, where there's some presentations by Hugo Bernier, Joel Rodriguez, Ejaz Hussain, and there's a SIG call on the April 18th. So those are the upcoming calls before Easter. And then we have a couple of minutes for Q&A. If there's any questions in the chat, or if someone has a good question, they can probably unmute themselves and ask it as well.
Is that how you answer questions, Mikael? You guys the hands up?
You know how I answer questions. Well, it depends if I think the question is clever or dumb, and depending on your background when you ask the question.
So is there any cause and effect that Besa didn't do the intro slides and we have time for Q&A at the end?
Yes.
Because I'm very much to the point when I present. That's my style.
Love you, Besa.
So there's a question. Is there a SharePoint Framework example using authorize.net? I have no idea. I haven't. You could probably, if you go to the samples repo and then search for authorize.net and see if someone has a sample on it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I really don't think we have anything related on that. So
I don't think you're going to be able. I don't know if you're going to find that, because that authorize.net. I mean, that's for. I mean, if you're talking about the payment processing and credit card processing thing, which if I remember calls, that's what authorize.net does. And if so, they don't have a client-side authentication model, and so you're going to have to be with the SharePoint framework. You're going to have some other service that's going to have to call that to authenticate on the back end, which means that it's really just a remote web service call and something you'd probably want to secure. So you want to use the Azure AD stuff. I think that's what you're looking for, Rob. But no, you won't find a sample that shows that, specifically calling authorize.net.
Quickly, well, Bert Jansen and Russell's question. Sean's question, any progress on the memory issues with SPFX 1.8 and Office UI Fabric 1 and React 6? We're working on an update releases on SharePoint Framework, so potentially having 1.81 and 1.82. So the 1.81 for immediate quick fixes, and then 1.82 for slightly larger fixes related on 1.8. So there are certain scenarios, if you develop certain things, you might run into issues. It is, however, safe to use the 1.8, but then if you run into these issues, then that's why we are releasing a new fixes on them. So, as an example, the memory thing. So.
Yeah, and there was a question on the publishing page and side pages. So I guess, Bert, so if you migrate your pages and turn off the publishing features and fix all your navigation to use this regular one, then you should be okay.
Well, theoretically, yes, but currently the tool does not allow you to do like an in-place modernization. So, but yeah, in theory, if you disable publishing, you're back to the side pages library for pages. Then you're back in the spot.
It's more, I mean, cleaning up the old publishing stuff from the site is not easy. So you're better off moving over to the site collection.
I think it's better to start clean and move things to neat communication sites and think about a new. Bit of a new information architecture, like which sites, how do you use hubs to kind of connect them. So I think if you do this exercise, it's often also time to rethink the whole model and start clean. And the page transformation helps you to move the bulk of the content over.
Yeah. Makes sense. And I guess we're actually out of time. So thank you, Bert, for your demo, and AC as well. Awesome demos, both of you. And look forward to having you people back on the next call. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Mikael, as well. Bye-bye.